Hey guys, this is Dang16. Welcome back to the MTT Principles Series. This is episode 7 today. We're going to continue with the progression of the MTT. Last week was the bubble that has burst, and now we are in the money. Again, similar to the bubble in a sense that it's extremely dynamic and always changing, and yeah, it's where being able to adapt, recognize what's going on in your table, recognize players, all that stuff that we've discussed throughout the series. Yeah, it's just continue to be even more important as we go on and as the tournament gets deeper and deeper. So, yeah, we're going to start off looking at some considerations similar to last week, and then we're going to go into some hands. I'm not really following anything exact this week. I don't have exact plays or any concepts I want to show a bunch of hands for. What I'm going to do here is give you guys some hands with different stack sizes in the money, discuss the considerations for each. Some are shoves, some are reshoves, some are a little bit deeper, and yeah, we'll just go over those. And these came about through questions on PM, some stuff on threads, and also just hands that I looked at when going through my database that I felt would bring some added value to the in the money discussion. So yeah, all right, let's go to considerations. This is essentially the exact same slide that we looked at during the bubble last week, but I think it's a good one with one added thing here as well. The definitely good to touch on again as the shift from the play on the bubble to in the money might be just completely different, and so just taking a look at all these considerations again can never hurt. Stacks, positions, and images. Very important again, always. Stack continues to be the first consideration in our strategy in MTT. What we can do, first off, depends on our stack. Sometimes the only play is shove or fold. So first thing to come into account is still position again. Very, very important. We've talked about it through the entire series. It continues to apply. In the money and the deeper you get into tournaments, you're not going to be playing nine-handed the entire time as you have been till now. It's going to be some more, 5 to 8-handed tables if it's full ring, or 3 to 6 as you're moving down in a six max. And this will of course alter your play a bit from under the gun and a bit while combating players under the gun or in later position of the blinds, all of it. But bottom line, position remains to be extremely important. Image. This is something I really want to discuss here in the money compared to the bubble. After the money bursts, the biggest nit goes nuts, or you might slow down from having played really aggressively. So, as the bubble bursts, just always be cognizant of what your image is coming off the bubble. If you're extremely active, whether that be with a big stack, with aggressive opens, 3-bets, shoves, or even if you were a small stack, taking advantage of a tight table and shoving from a lot of different positions. Just you got to know that people are going to be very, very aware of this and are going to often start to play back at you, especially in the money, especially right after the bubble bursts and you've been active. I'll continue to try to be as aggressive as possible, especially with a lot of chips, especially in good plus EV shove spots, and always just has the stack to allows it. But as soon as I start to see some resistance, if I continue with my mega aggression with a huge stack just I had on the bubble, and I start getting reshipped on all the time, well, I'm going to adjust that. I'm going to tighten up with my opening range. Probably look either just tighten up or just continue with 3-bets. Just find a way to adapt. your image before the bubble is obviously something to take into account as well, especially if you've been with a lot of the same players throughout this tournament, or your tables stayed together, or even if you just have prior history. If you play on a website that doesn't have, then if you're not playing massive field tournaments all the time, or if you're playing a lot of the same like 180 man sit and goes, and you see a lot of the same players, past history, notes, HUD stats, they all come into account as well. So, your image right in the money is going to be a hybrid of what you're doing on the bubble and in anything else. Just keep in mind, though, it's a lot of the time this is a what have you done for me lately game. I've played lots of tournaments on AP, on Absolute, and UB with the same guys. And even though I traditionally play a really tight game, if one time you just have a mega stack and you're just catching cards, sometimes they just continue to not give you credit. If after showing down maybe like one bad hand, they just only remember what recently happened. So, it's got to be a hybrid of all those things. Opponent's image just continues to be extremely important again. And also maybe even not even more so, but I think it's definitely huge here. The biggest nit of all time, like the biggest nit ever on the bubble might just turn into a maniac after the bubble burst. I'm sure people see that in the higher buy-ins, like the main event a lot. Someone who's in there for $200 is going to try to get into the money, but then their their persona, their game comes out. So, try and keep all these in mind when electing, how to play directly after the bubble. Continue to, to make sure you're keeping an eye on everything and be ready to adapt. Next up, table dynamic. This is where it can be really weird. Of course, it can be really weird from early in the tournament as well. You might have crazy different size stacks, but, on the bubble and right as you get into the money, that's where you'll see everything from a stack size of 1 blind to even like 1,000. People will let themselves blind down to 1, just to cash, which is just ridiculous. It's all about playing for top threes. So yeah, be prepared, and I'm sure if you've played any at all, you'll see a big disparity in stack sizes. And if it's like if this is the 1 rebuy, or the 3 rebuy with 7,000 people, right as you hit the money, the big changes in stacks will be even greater. If you're talking about like a 180 man tournament, it's possible where all 18 players in the money have exactly the same stack. Much more likely than in that 3 rebuy. That would be damn near impossible. So, at this point, we should be able to take a look at the stacks at our table, combine with our own stack, what we know about the other players, and be pretty comfortable with what we can do with our stacks and versus other players. If we have 13 blinds, there's not a whole lot we can do. It's about getting it in, So, or if like the effective stack's 5 blinds and we're blind versus blind, there's only one play, shove or fold, and you might get that occasional cute limp, but that's, comes to something else. 99% of the time it's shove or fold, or call a shove, of course. Next up is game flow. And this could be a really weird thing right after the bubble bursts. Obviously the vast majority, or a big majority of the time, the table's going to start opening up and getting a lot more aggressive after the bubble bursts. Especially if you're at a table, or if you're at a table with like 7 smaller stacks or moderate stacks. These guys that were playing really tight to just protect their stack and get in the money are obviously going to be willing to try to gamble a bit more and try to get the stack, try to get deep. And of course the marginal stacks, maybe the 20 to 30 blind stack with a couple aggressive players, maybe they were just sitting back on the bubble. hoping for a good spot, but if it didn't come, it didn't come. Well, now that they've managed to get through into the money, and they still have that nice marginal stack, they're going to be a bit more willing to gamble, mix it up, and try to put together that stack to make a run. So yeah, more often than not, the table opens up, and it may not be as dominated by one player. One player is definitely, with the right stack and the right dynamic, is capable of just destroying a table on the bubble. Well, no matter what that table is, someone's going to start playing back at him. So, game flow. Continue to change the deeper we get. Always be willing to adapt. Bottom line. Okay. One difference in the slide between this week and last week, as far as the considerations, I put the cream rises to the top here, as you'll see. In the early stages of the tournament, we've discussed that all of the weak players are still in the tournament in the early game, and we need to adjust there accordingly. In contrast to that, the deeper you get in an MTT, more often than not, it's the better players in that field who get there. If it's a 200 rebuy on Sunday where there's not many fish, of course the final table is going to be strong, and good. But if it's a $2 10,000 man turbo where there is some good players, they might just get blown up by the minefield, and it's just anything can happen. But in a vacuum, it's definitely the case. The better players in the field will get there at the end. So when I start to get deeper in an MTT, really want to have a good idea of the competition more than just like the HUD stats, or just what you see from the game flow or previous play, or if you don't even or you may not recognize the name. Like in the tournaments I play, I see a lot of the same regulars, so of course, I might know just by seeing the name. So, deep I get in a tournament and I've got people I don't know around me, definitely want to start using a database read, something like SharkScope, OPR. I just want to know if they're experienced or not, or if they're a winner or a loser. Experience is one thing too, because it's someone that's only 50 tournaments in. They might seem to be playing very aggressive and very good or tough, and then you realize they may not have the experience. You might be able to figure out some spots to exploit them. So yeah, just anytime you can use a small read like this to help make a tough decision, or a decision that's really in the gray area, I think by all means use it. Use any information that's out there. You don't need to start searching every player at your table the second you get in the money, but the deeper you get, and if you're having trouble with like one particular player, something on your left or right, feel free, use the database reads. It never hurts to use that information. Last two things on the considerations here: the field size and the buy-in. Very important still. I've made contrast, or talked about the difference between the 3 rebuy compared all the way to like the main event, the World Series, or even like 180s, $4 180 mans. All needs to be taken into account, of course. The smaller the field size, the closer you are to the final table when the bubble bursts. Say it's a 150-man tournament where 18 get paid. Well, that tournament might stay really, really tight all the way to the final table. You 18 left. You only have to get through 9 more players. Even that's halfway through the rest of the tournament, but might play tight all the way down. Also, the stacks might also be really even there in a tournament like that. So, field size can narrow that gap between the stack sizes. Also, yeah, and it's like, compare that 18 people getting paid to 600 in a 3 rebuy. 600 down to 9 is a full tournament, or 3 full tournaments depending on the size. So, in the money dynamic can be quite different depending on the field size. Um, Buy-in, the higher buy-in has a couple different things that need to be taken into account. You More often than not, of course, the better players are going to be around, and it's going to be a tougher field as a whole. So those are the ones that are going to be there at the end. But on the contrary, there also could be some satellite players, people in over their head or just taking a shot. This goes back to what we just talked about on the cream rising to the top part is, you want to know who's who if you don't already. If you're a mid stakes reg, you might know two or three of the guys on your table all the time. If you're playing $2 180s, you might not know anybody ever. So, you know, always wanting to know who you're against always helps. So yeah, that goes through our discussion on just the considerations, the things that absolutely need to be taken into account when adapting to the situation and determining your in the money strategy. Bottom line, at this point in the tournament, it's when we're really playing. I mean, we're playing for top threes and wins at all times. That's just how it's weighted. That's how you make money. But we want to be as aggressive as possible always. I'll just always preface my play that I want to be as aggressive as possible, just to all dependent on the situation. So yeah, let's get started. Next up, we're gonna do these some hands that I've put together from in the money play. The first ones are gonna be about 18 blind stack and under. We're looking more at getting it in pre or some calls, stuff like that. Then there's going to be like some 18 to 30 blind stuff. Just looking at some reshoves, some big hands. And then 30 plus blinds, where there's going to be more creativity. Well, not a ton of creativity, but more post-flop play, all that good stuff. So yeah, let's get started with the hands. Alright, so now we're going to start taking a look at some of the hands that I had saved for the in the money discussion. Like I said in the beginning of the episode, some of these arose just from questions that I had received in PM threads, and also just some hands that I remembered from recent sessions and from looking through the database that I thought might tie some things together. Again, everything that we've learned throughout this series is applicable, and a lot of things that you can do in the money, of course, the light three betting, shoving, reshoving, all the stuff that we've talked about. So, this is just more hands for you, to answer your questions. So it's just actually simply an open shove. Someone was talking to me about getting a little too short at times. And, one of my suggestions was to start treating, like 13 to 15 blinds, how that player did with tens, and also knowing when to do it. I elected to jam about 15 blinds here from the button with king six suited versus two guys that I had as nits, based on HUD stats and how they had been playing. This is not something I'm gonna be doing all the time, but keep your eye out for spots like this with 10 to 15 blind stacks. A lot of the time you might have good blinds to attack directly to your left, and you can make a shove that's unexploitable, that they can't come over the top of you. And this one, I get the folds, and it's a really nice increase to my 14 blind stack. Alright, so this next hand just definitely came from a question that I got via PM. Trouble playing blind. Actually, no, this came from a hand in the forums, I think. People having trouble blind versus blind, with kind of some bigger shoves and what type of calling range. Well, it's always going to depend, of course, on the situation. But it's one of those spots that I had a really aggressive player here in the small blind, and rips about 18 blinds into me here. Definitely felt vastly ahead of his range, just based on, the amount of times he had shoved and reshoved before, and I had seen a semi-light reshove out of him. I think it was like King 8 of clubs or something like that. So here, it's just pretty much an easy call for me, blind versus blind, and he is actually really, really weak there. So, he's shoving. This is a player that looks to be shoving like 90%, 85, 90% of hands there. Blind versus blind. Don't be afraid to make this call in the money, or on bubbles for that matter. Just all depends on your read, of course, and versus some people this is going to be an obvious fold as well. But I had some questions about blind versus blind stuff and people shoving on your big blind. Don't be afraid to make the big call. Just make sure you've got information, in order to do it. Okay, a bit in contrast to the last hand. This was a spot where I kind of went against my initial instinct and my initial read, and against the HUD a little bit, and made what I think was a poor call versus this opponent. So you get to see, bad call as well. Guy jammed 17 blinds here. I don't remember the exact HUD numbers, but been pretty tight. 17 blinds from the cutoff. I kind of just talked myself into a little bit wider range than he was probably playing. I'd also seen him overshove a couple hands that didn't get called. So I think I kind of talked myself into calling here with, I don't know why I didn't show the run out, with kings pre-flop on his 17 blind stack, or with fives, he ended up having kings. I just think that, I also had a pretty good idea of what was going on at the table. I wasn't having trouble picking up chips. And that being said, I wish I had just, held on to that 28 blind stack and looked for better spots. At this point, I don't really think I dominate a ton of hands, and I absolutely have the potential to be dominated him. So, one thing I just wanted everybody to get out of this is, before you make these type of hero calls or something that you think is marginally plus EV, or even, maybe just neutral, just, think of what the effect is going to be to your stack if you win the pot and if you lose it. This would be a nice addition to my stack, and I'd like to have like 45 blinds, but this also puts me in a tough spot, and I just don't think like I said, I don't think I ever dominate anything. So, watch out with these hero calls as well. The big difference between this last hand with ace-7 and this pocket fives hand here is the villain, and just completely different stats. I had a completely different tell and image of them. So, a lot of the time your first your first thought is correct. Go with it. All right, so this next hand, just another, situation under 18 blinds. Just another way to kind of generate some chips. Had some questions about squeezing, and this is about the smallest stack as I will do something like this verse, and it was definitely based on the villains as well. Player had been opening a ton of pots here. Opens in semi-early position. And just got flatted by a player who had been real calling station, but a bit timid as well. Big aggression or big pushback seemed to, really get this guy out of pots, and he was giving credit to a lot of hands and folding. Also thought that Hal Rua, or a guy here, kind of had that same read on him as well. While he'd been really active, I thought he was capable of get him off some hands, and that was the reason that I shipped it in here. Not a ton of fold equity with that 18 blind stack, and not something I'm going to do and every single time the situation comes up. This was also coming off the bubble in a rebuy tournament. And yeah, I've been really tight. Thought my image was going to work perfect for me here. And, this is a potential to pick up like a 40% addition to my stack. Yeah, definitely a squeeze. But again, about as small a stack as I will ever do that with. And luckily, folds come through. A lot of the time, these squeezes are going to be with a lot bigger stack. I like to do it like 20 to 25, just with a lot of fold equity. But there are definitely times that you can do it with smaller stacks here. Definitely keep your image into account. The tighter your image is, the better. And this is a lot of the time where I will try to put it together is when I have been card dead, have that tight image, and it's a multi-way pot, 2 or 3-way pot. With quite a bit of incentive to do it. All right, the last thing I wanted to talk about in this the 0 to 18 blind effective stack. That's kind of what we've been looking at here with these last 5 hands. Another thing that continues to come up in discussion is small pairs and marginal stacks, set mining. A lot of people still have trouble wrapping their finger around when it's good to set mine and when it's not. This was just about, I've got about 19 blinds here, and pocket threes in a spot where, some people might be considering a set mine. Well, and a couple things going for me here. It's almost 10 to 1 implied. If I set mine, it's multi-way, and yeah, hopefully we might even get one or two more callers based on the action. But we also had quite a few things going against me. We had some aggressive players behind me who had shown the ability to squeeze, things like that, and when the odds are marginal here, which they are. You could probably make this call. A lot of people are probably making this call and then folding when there's a re-raise or something like that behind. And when that's happening too much, you're giving away 12% of your stack without even seeing a flop, without even having the opportunity to take it down, and that's just not a very good use of chips at all. And so while this might be very borderline as far as flopping a set and getting paid, having the aggressive players behind me are just another reason that I didn't want to set mine here. Let's say I've got a few more chips around that 25 blinds, which is still a little bit on the small side for me, but it's a tight table and there have been passive players behind. I might take a real borderline set mine in a spot like this. I have had that happen quite a few times live, where I'll make a more speculative set mine because there's four or five players in the hand, and it might be a really timid table pre-flop. So yeah, I hope that clears up some of the questions that have come up of when to set mine. You really want to have good, bottom line, you really want to have good implied odds, and yeah, position helps, huge, of course. All right, so now we're gonna actually, this hand is actually goes in with the last ones, but after this one, the next couple of hands are kind of gonna be in that 18 to 30 effective stack area. Just want to show another reshove, kind of a bigger squeeze, and also kind of a way I like to play big hands with this stack. So just a simple reshove spot here. Again, question about how short you can do it semi-light. This isn't even really that light either. King 10 offsuit, but versus a guy with 23 blinds who's opening a full 3x, and me only having 17k, without any other information, this might look a little bit light, and I would want some other information. Knew we had two tight players here in the blinds, which made the decision a bit easier, but not a huge factor in it. Just the fact that I had a brutalizer here on my right who had raised folded like 4 or 5 times in the last couple orbits. A couple times to me, and I think once more to other players. So even though it's on the small side, and he's getting a good price. I still felt like I had a ton of fold equity, and in a lot of these low stakes, even up to the mid stakes tournaments, if you pick up on people that don't seem to have a good idea of stack size, whether they're still 3 and 4x folding a big percentage of their stack, or they're still opening 3x no matter where they are, or 4x, or anything like that that makes you believe that you have more fold equity versus that person. We can do you can light through you can reshove on them quite a bit lighter. Not even like king 10 offsuit here. Stuff like 8-6 suited, 8-9 suited, stuff like that. It's not fully. It's more about the player than the hand a lot of the time. So don't be afraid to reshove as small as 14 blinds if you have a good idea of what the player's doing. All right, so now we've got a little bit bigger stack here. We're talking about 22, 23-ish blinds here. Just a good squeeze, and it was definitely a big part about the opponents. Four aces had actually been playing pretty good, if I remember, but this player over here, I don't really know what that name is, but Ching, whatever that is, had been really, really aggressive. Like it was, HUD stats were huge. Like VPIP of about was like 60. It was like 60-40. But I really thought that four aces wasn't flatting huge. He's more or less trying to see flops in position and take advantage of the other player's aggression. So I just put them both on a huge range here, but also know that my hand plays pretty good. It's also 6 max, so I might get called a little bit lighter, but at the same time they're opening a little bit lighter. So could be in that, just hoping to utilize all my fold equity here, and also my image was tight. They'd been playing a lot of pots together, and I just thought this was a really good opportunity with a ton of fold equity, and so I ripped it in here. Unfortunately, I got called by one player, but he's got pocket fours, and just in this situation, I was quite right that they're opening semi-wide, and that four aces was calling pretty wide. But this also shows when you're the aggressor and do the shoving, not the calling. Sometimes you can get in these situations where you actually have quite a bit of equity, and you put the pressure on them. You're also going to get a lot of folds from pocket fours here. We ended up winning the race. Hand plays really, really good there. So, that was two examples of squeezes, with the queen 9 suited earlier and the 9-10 kind of out of position and multi-way pots. Just hope they weren't too far off of each other based on stack sizes, but both times I had a tight image versus aggressive players that I also thought I had quite a bit of fold equity with. And in the first one I did get that fold. Second one I got called pretty light, and luckily we were able to win a big race there. All right, so around this 20 to 30 blind stack, a lot of the time it sets up well for kind of slow playing, flatting, hand like aces pre. Also depends on who's at the table. Had some aggressive players behind me, and I thought this was going to be a good opportunity to set up, hopefully set up a squeeze. Aggressive player opens here. We flat the aces here. Luckily the big blind did do just exactly, as we said, if it's a table where they're doing a lot of flatting pre, not that aggressive, haven't really seen any squeezing, then it doesn't make as much sense, of course. But, in this spot I thought it worked out really well. Also, kind of depends on, what your image is at the table. I hadn't been playing a lot of pots at this point, and I think the only two other hands I had entered, I had 3-bet So I just decided to mix it up and hope to get that squeeze behind me, and luckily we did. And the guy had fives. I don't really blame him too much, and luckily they handheld. So yeah, just keep that in mind. You don't want. I don't like to do flatting with those big hands um, on a real like collie table where a lot of people in the pot's pre. If that's the case, I look to three bet, look to try to get it in, protect the hand a little bit. So yeah, hopefully that you can add that play in when you get an aggressive table. All right, so for the last couple of hands here, we were going to talk about a little bit deeper stacks. We're going to go over just kind of a light four bet and why, a little bit more of a creative deep stack play. And here, this is just a standard, lighter three bet. But I was getting some questions on, proceeding post flop. A lot of the time you're just not going to hit the flop, but more often than not, especially in position, you just got to continue, put in a good C bet, and go from there. So yeah, here, player that I had been three betting a lot, had been really active, but had also been able to take pots away from him post flop. Small three bet here, about 2.3 times his open, and do get flatted here out of position. Just don't really flop anything. Board semi-wet, but again, if checked me, this is why I like doing it in position. I can put in a little smaller bet. I have control of the pot, and I can put out the type of bet to where I can get away from it, but I also think it's going to take it down a ton. This only has to work for me, about, what about one every or two every five ish, to even be profitable. So yeah, continue when you make those three bets, even when you whiff. Use your position, use your aggression, and the fact that you've already taken charge of the pot, and yeah, just try to be aggressive and take it down there on the flop. And luckily, it worked, and I got that fold. Oh, and you got to be cognizant of the players that you're doing it versus. You have to pick the people that you want to play a little light versus. You got to pick them well, and you have to have a reason for it. Yeah. All right, this is actually from a six max tournament, pretty deep in the money. I think about 3 or 4 tables left here. And just, an example of a four bet, lighter four bet. This is something that I might also do, deeper stacked. It just might be a different type of hand. Meth33 and I have played quite a bit together and had a little bit of history and been banging on each other back and forth. But yeah, let's just kind of discuss the four bet here. So I open my standard just low over a min raise, and I get three bet, and this is quite a bit bigger, and that was a big reason for my four bet. He had clicked back aces, and another big hand, I forget exactly what it was, while we had been playing together, and I had that note, and I just felt that this was a little bit bigger, just looking to take it down pre. I had also made a smaller size four bet with a really big hand, myself against a different player, and so I thought doing that again here in this situation will keep him from three betting me lightly, so I can continue to try to bang on him from the cutoff and the button, and just also I thought it was a good opportunity to pick up some chips because I hadn't seen him make this three bet sizing yet. So I make it 91, not just pretty much an essential click back, and got the fold. So again, I'm not going to do that very often that light. Just has to have a reason, and pick and choose your situations very well. You don't want to be four betting every opportunity you get, but you want to stay a bit balanced. You can't just have aces or kings, kings or queens or ace king. You need to have some other hands to stay a bit balanced. All right, the last little hand here I'm going to show here today is a big hand that was a little bit of creative. We had been playing together quite a bit, had a pretty good idea of this table. This is from the DNG on Sunday. It was really, really deep good feel, or not necessarily a good feel, but great structured tournament. Has a lot more creativity, post flop, deep stack play, all that good stuff. So I luckily get aces here under the gun, open, get flatted. Player only had been at the table with for about 3 orbits, but I had seen what was going on at the other table, knew he was aggressive. And flop top set here, obviously loving this. Want to give him the opportunity to tool out here, to do something in position to try to bluff us. I'd also been c-betting 30 to 40% pot a lot, so I continued and did that here on the small side, just about 35% of the pot, and get raised here. Guys put in a pretty good chunk of his stack, but definitely still capable of folding. And then, the fact that I have top set removes a lot of the other hands that might automatically call me. So here I just elect to call. Want to definitely give him at least one more chance to bluff us or do something kind of dumb. So then on the turn, 2 of clubs. Good card for us. Brings one more draw, but we have the ace of clubs. Obviously a good blocker. So I want to give him one more. I wanted to give him one more chance here to just spew if he doesn't have anything, and also if he has a hand to just get it in. So I wanted to look really, really weak here on the turn, kind of like I was, trying to get a cheap turn or just kind of dictate the size of or cheap river, or dictate the size of the pot. So bet just under 90K here into 410. Real small bet. Obviously not something I'm going to do all the time, but I thought this was a good opportunity to get him to rip in. And unfortunately he did. He did, he picked up a draw there on the turn with, had the gutter on the flop, but, gave him the opportunity to raise us multiple times, and we kind of gave out that perceived weakness. Also, after doing this, I have to be cognizant that the table sees it, and might have to alter the play versus anybody else later on. But luckily, he whiffed, hit quads, and ended up getting deep in the tournament. So yeah, there was a couple. I hope that those hands all helped. They were in different stack sizes. Some of the same similar type of plays. Like we showed a couple squeezes, call of shoves, 3 bets, couple different like more creative type plays like this with aces, and the 4-bet with king 3, the flat with aces with a little bit smaller stack. So I'm hoping that these hands mixed with everything, all the other hands and concept that we've taken a look at together, are all really starting to mesh together. A lot of the things that we did in episode 2 are still relevant now. Position and or positive EV. The shoving is going to come into play at all times, no matter if you're in the money, out of the money, final table, shorthanded. If it's a plus EV shove or call, it's a plus EV shove or call, and we need to do that. If it's a plus EV check shove with a lot of fold equity, you can do that in the money, just like off the bubble. So for our next lesson, next week, we're going to focus on, late game, like final table bubble. Also, we'll discuss some different, sometimes there's some pay jump bubbles as well at 18 or 27 in big fields that shouldn't be really, shouldn't be huge, but we'll talk about them. Also, just the fact that you get to play shorthanded, 5 to 8-handed more deep in that tournament. You just have to adapt your ranges a little bit. So we'll definitely discuss that. And then final table play. Every final table is going to be very different. Again, we'll talk about the considerations for each, how to adapt. So hopefully you guys did get something out of this one. Keep the questions coming. It spurns the ideas and concepts that I'm going to go over, and want to know what you guys want to hear. All right. just Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. It's Dang 16 for Deuces Cracked. Thanks, guys.